This is the Educational Triage Podcast. Welcome. We invite you to come along with us on an exploration of interviews, issues, and other exciting and relevant topics in education, especially alternative education. They say alternative education is a laboratory for mainstream education. Why? Well, join us every week and listen in as Philip Summers
Aloha.
and I, Tony Hunt, jump in feet first to discuss issues that may affect our classes, students, communities, as well as our teaching. Please subscribe if you enjoy and find relevance in what you experience here. And if you haven't left a quick review, please do. We appreciate your candor and insights so we can improve as we move forward. Now, let's see what's on board today. And welcome back, everybody. It's great to see you or be planted in your ear again this week for another rousing episode of Educational Triage. Philip, how are you doing?
Aloha. I'm doing well.
Oh, good.
She's in your ear. I think that was a Happy Days insult. I'm not sure. Sit on it was, but I didn't know if in your ear.
Was it?
In your ear, it's in your ear is an insult. I thought.
Oh.
It might have been. I don't know.
Maybe if you were doing a wet willy or something like that.
Oh, those were awful. One person did that once. It was horrifying.
Well, this week we're going to look at community involvement in building a great alternative program/school. Last week we talked about leadership, and we covered a lot of territory on that, but there are still things that are going to be coming up as we go through where we're going to mention maybe some other epiphanies that we have as we go along. But anyway, community and the community involvement. And we talked about parental involvement at some point. We talked about how to build a community. Well, we're going to bring in the community. And so if you're going to have an alternative program, one of the things that you're going to be lacking is resources. And one of the best resources that you have is usually right outside your front door. And the first one, Philip's flashing me with some kind of a disco ball or something.
It's my granddaughter's toy.
Oh,
sorry.
One of those are the businesses that are out there. And a lot of businesses are just jonesing for people to go to work for them because they cannot find enough skilled labor out there. They cannot find people who are interested in those fields. And that can include the STEM, that can include the trades, that may include business. It could include a ton. So if we are going to start something, then we also want to involve the businesses so that we can bring kids in. If we have second language learners, we can use those as translators, and that would actually reinforce a lot of the work that they're doing in the school, and it would help bolster everything. So, and there are a lot of businesses who need translation. Even the government offices need something like that. There are really endless ways to involve businesses. So I'm going to now open up our floor for discussion, Philip, because let's go. I want to start off with businesses, and we talk about careers, and students never seem to know what they want to do, if they're going to major in something in college or what they're going to do once they graduate. So how do we involve businesses into our community school?
Businesses are, I know of a school in Indiana, I believe. But I was doing some work looking into how multiple intelligences work in education. And originally we had the 8 and things like that. But we've since learned there's multiple ways of interpreting multiple intelligences. It's kind of funny. Anyway, so they had ways of going into vocations in sort of pods. And if I recall correctly, it was in 4-week pods. You had an experiential piece and then a classroom piece. And they were divided up in, say, a medical. And so it was near a medical facility. And so kids were I think they were shadowing in certain departments where they could shadow and working with
Mm-hmm.
medical professionals. And then another phase of it was working with fire departments and that medical aspect, the emergency medical aspect. I think one was in construction. Another 4 week phase was in construction, and they were required to do construction type stuff and mathematics stuff. Everything was, of course, based and grounded in all the subjects, and that was the school part. So if you were doing the medical, of course, I have a background as being a paramedic. Learning drug doses and
Mm-hmm.
how to titrate that through the drips and things like that is not too easy. It involves a little math, and if you screw up, bad things can happen. So the kids weren't doing things like that, but they were doing the math for it. And with construction, that's obvious. I think there were ones in design and civil service. They were working at the city government
Mm-hmm.
and doing internships down there and seeing how that was going together. Incidentally, I was working with a fifth grade class today as a guest teacher, and they had a whole unit where they were a business, and they were putting together a loan package and trying to get funding and,
Mm-hmm.
and advertisement, which is interesting. But yeah, grown up stuff. And this was a middle school, eighth grade
Oh, that's
school.
awesome.
Yeah, and the
There
kids had
are
a taste of that stuff, and they had to actually go through it. Yeah.
Well, there are a number of programs throughout the country, a number of schools where they're actually making things work and that they can do it with the businesses. In Massachusetts, they have vocational technical schools, and they're a national model. And they actually have a publication that is called Hands on Achievement Massachusetts National Model Vocational Technical Schools through the Pioneer Institute of Public Policy Research. And it's really kind of, for me, it's heartwarming because, as you know, my last 9 years I spent career in career education, in a sense, where
Yeah, you
we
had
sent
that tight thing. Yeah, that,
right
that
we
close
we
connection with internships, was it?
right we sent
Basically. Yeah.
kids out on internships where they
Yeah.
would learn more about the business and possibly get a job, or maybe it actually gave them a direction in which to go,
Mm-hmm.
and or it also taught them where not to go.
I was going to say where not to go,
Yeah.
which is
um
important too.
well, and then when they did, some of them were in working with tiny tots, and they were also working with teachers in schools, and that almost worked as a really good birth control for many of them. So it's
It gets real quick.
it does. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it has many sides, and while some people may not appreciate the humor of that, there really is, it really did make good impacts, and
Well,
it's all
we worked in
positive.
programs with teen parents. I worked in one for many years.
Hmm.
We had teen parents. So, yeah.
And so some of the problems that we ran into, though, were with construction. We were in the middle of a huge construction project at our building, and I reached out to the company and asked them if we could get a couple of kids in on the construction end of it, and with mentors, just part time. And all of a sudden, I received calls for these kids who really just wanted to get their hands dirty. They wanted to get in there. And I was thinking that they were just going to be ditch diggers to start, I mean, real remedial, rudimentary kinds of beginnings to
Yeah.
construction.
Here's a shovel
And
kid.
and this guy calls me and he says, "Yeah, I've got a computer for them." I said, "What does he need a computer for? He just needs a shovel or something, right?" He says, "What are you talking about?" And so we started talking, and he was given the impression that we were looking for engineering student placement.
Holy cow.
And I said, "No." I said, "I don't have any kids right now who would fall into that. I can find out from the engineering teacher whether or not there might be some kids who might be interested in
Huh.
that. And maybe we can do that. But
Yeah.
I said, I just need this." And he said, "I'm not sure the union will allow it." And of course, the union said no. There was no way we could get them in there. And we tried.
Yeah.
And
That
so,
happened a lot of times when I came up with an idea. It just
mhm,
couldn't. They said no. Somebody said no.
yeah. And
Ah.
so, when you run into national corporations, when you run into a lot of these things,
Mhm.
you aren't really able to get into really can't get the kids in through the front doors in order to work in some of those businesses.
Mm.
Um, Even though you might be able to brainstorm and come up with some ideas of what the kids might actually be there for and how they could teach them and how they could handle them. Um, the neighboring school district from ours, in fact, the one that I live in, they have huge partnerships with Tektronix. They have partnerships with Nike. They run all kinds of internships at their with their career institutes, and they're able to do that. So it is possible. It's just that you have to get the right people with the right affiliations.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
did have manufacturing reach out to us, and so we put kids into the manufacturing, and they were allowed to actually go out there and do some things. We had
There's ways to get around that. If you can have the students produce something on their end, then they can get a lot of freedom on that side. For example, well, one of the programs actually I worked with, I didn't work in this program, but they had a garden and they had
mm,
worked in a couple of plots of land, but they
mhm,
finally kind of settled, I think, on a really good plot of land. Got settled, was great, great produce, sold it, um, turned it into a business, managed the business side of it, managed the gardening side of it. It was very conscientious. They had some teachers that were, advising it all. And there's also, I knew somebody in 3D printing and using maker stuff. You know, for those of you who aren't familiar with maker stuff, that 3D printing, that's like decals. There's ways to engineer materials to create really high end art. These kids can learn to do through computers and maker materials,
mhm,
robotics, things like that. So you can create these things. You get a lot more freedom instead of going to the lab that the company would own because they got the
right,
insurance to think about, and they're not teachers per se, so they wouldn't
right.
know how to deal with the kids, but we can do it. So yeah,
Yeah, and if the school has something to train the kids so that the kids can go
yeah,
in there with some semblance of knowledge and a
yeah.
background. So
Maybe bring the people into you guys. That would be
right.
helpful
And
too.
so if you can establish those mentorships with the internships or even just be able to bring people in to work with your students, there was a time when Intel would come out and they would work with schools,
Hmm.
and they would partner with the schools, and they would teach them about how to build a computer and do the interior work of the computer. And there
Yeah,
were little kits that the kids got. And so that was kind of cool.
that
But
is cool.
I'm not sure whatever happened to that.
Well, we
But,
had that whole thing over in that one district where they just build computers out of other computers and then
right.
disseminate them all over the district. And those kids were, as you'd think, pretty exclusive and kind of
Hmm.
nerdy, but they all learned a ton.
Oh, yeah. And
They were really smart kids.
yeah, they do pretty well. And
Uh,
I'm just thinking it doesn't have to be tech. It doesn't have to be something like
mhm.
that. It could be something else.
It can
I
be
used
anything, really. Yeah.
Right. I got myself involved with some different community organizations of different businesses where they went in, and I would go in and I would pitch and say, here's what I do. Here's what I would like. I just want people to come in and talk to my kids
Hmm.
and run something. And so they did. And they learned about money marketing management. They learned about real estate. They learned all kinds of different businesses. So it kind of wetted their whistle in a sense
Yeah.
and got them going with that. But it also brought in goodwill on the part of the business. And it also let them know that we existed because this was a small program and the kids didn't really get out that much. But still,
Yeah.
even in a regular high school, there is always some way that businesses want to partner with the schools, but they're not really sure how to do it.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
this year, I believe that not my predecessor, my successor is running a beauty school component after school for kids who want to do it, grades 10 on up. And this way they can start working towards earning a certification in cosmetology or something, and it's through the local beauty school. And so who's going to come in and they're going to teach the kids on the days when there's actually an activities bus to bus them at the end of the day, um, past the time that regular school does. So the kids can still receive transportation home, and they can
Oh,
do this, and this would be free, but they have to be committed to it. So just doing that, because you know, people need people, they need bodies. We still have a lot of businesses that are looking for people. And so it's not just the people who are going to be stocking the shelves and running the cashier, um, being
yeah.
being the cashiers, etc.
Well, you could do that. The police also, there are some ride-alongs you can go on, depending on your age. I don't believe that unless you're over 18, you can go on a ride-along
Well, you
with
can,
a duty officer. I don't know. Maybe
you
you
can.
can. Okay, good.
There,
Good,
there
good
are,
to know.
but there,
But
you if
yeah,
you check with your local police department, there are certain things, but
yeah,
there are also certain commitments that have to be made, and one of
certainly.
those is a GPA, and there are some other
Oh,
obligations, and
excellent.
so.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of requirements they have, but they also know how to do it. And that was my point.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of agencies and businesses that have set up education departments. You know, they actively know about how to do this, but there are some that don't. Those are the ones, the connected ones, the small ones, the ones where you go, hey, maybe like you did, you go out there and go, can maybe my students work with you? Those are the ones that we don't know about, and
Mhm.
so they don't have the departments, and so the educators have to be able to kind of take the liaison role, or even maybe the lead role, probably the lead role, really, and make sure that everything's going well with the lessons, and the lessons are actually formed. If you want to do it that way, you almost have to.
Right.
Probably, I always did that way, unless I knew that the kid was doing something that was really structured.
Mhm.
The internship, I kind of had a packet of things I wanted to see him do with it. And that way, it didn't leave it up to their boss, because their boss really doesn't know what to do with it, or their mentor, or whoever they're working with.
Yeah.
So yeah, they don't. They kind of like, no what? So we have to
Okay.
tell them. Yeah.
Okay. So we're through that component, and I know we can spend at least one episode just going through business
Oh, just
and
throwing ideas up.
how
Yeah,
to
where?
develop the business. One of the
Yeah.
best ways to do the business, though, is actually put together a packet about your program, what you want, what are your goals, and some kind of a simple contract with them, and just go out there and pitch it to them and have your business card and just meeting with them because they're fascinated, they're interested. It also looks good for them. And for some of the bigger ones, it's a tax write off. So there may be some tax incentives for them to do it.
Did everybody hear about that tax write-off thing? I'm sorry.
But it's also a really good advertising
It
for them.
is.
So, and for some of the small businesses, they really need the help. They really do. But the next thing that we want to look at is, are your students going to have to volunteer? And just going out into the community because your students might have to volunteer. Let's say that they need to volunteer 10 to 15 hours a quarter.
Okay.
Because if you are a community centered program, then your students need to give back to the community because if they're getting something from the community, and
Yeah.
it really doesn't hurt. And so some of the ways that you can do that would be you could do adopt a highway, and maybe you do that twice a year, three times a year, and you go out there with the students and you talk to the Department of Transportation. They will help you. Um, you go out there and you clean the streets. Maybe you have kids who go in on holidays and they work with Meals on Wheels. Maybe they are able to go in and work with an activity director at one of the senior centers in memory care or something like that. But it needs to be genuinely doing that. No, working for your parents for free is not volunteering.
No, no.
No,
You don't.
going to your buddy's house and helping them paint their house isn't volunteering.
However, going to your buddy's grandmother's house and helping paint her house because she couldn't possibly do it, and
Right,
you helping him and her is
right.
definitely community service. Yes.
Or if there's an older person who lives on your street and their yard
Mm-hmm.
looks really tacky and
Yep.
natty and and just run down, really
Mm-hmm.
shoddy,
Yep.
go over there and talk to them, and maybe you can get some friends and they can do something like that.
Yeah, some people are really, really shy and they don't want to go volunteer or ask somebody if they can volunteer. That's the
Hmm.
last thing they want to do. But they would do anything for someone they know, like their next door neighbor who's old and can't do things. They do that all the time, and that counts. And they do things in church, and that counts, and all
Hmm.
kinds of stuff.
Right. Church
Yeah,
works if you're doing something, if you're in scouting or something,
yeah,
that would
scouts do too.
that would work. If
Yeah,
you are doing something because you have to do some kind of a clothing drive or something because for another organization at the school, that works as well. If you're doing
yeah,
something at the library, I mean, that what it is coming out of yourself and doing something for other people in in a sort of selfless kind of way, because what that does is that helps generate more community. And so what we had our kids do was, in order for them to even enter our program, they had to sign a contract that stated that they would do this and that they would have all those volunteer hours done and completed every quarter by before the end of the quarter. And we would have requests from different schools because they would have a parent night. Can you send us over some students who might be able to watch the kids tonight and just sort of tutor them for like 3 4 hours? And the kids would say, yeah, I'm up for it. um, and there's some other opportunities that we're going to talk about a little bit later here. But yeah, so, and working in the parks, doing things there, but you need to have something that's sanctioned. So you can't just say, Billy and I went down to the park and we picked up trash for 3 hours yesterday. But there needs to be a form for them to fill out, and have somebody who supervised them who said that they actually did it. Going to the food bank works as well, so they can do stuff with their parents that way or with somebody else's parent. There's just a lot of ways to do it. But, involving the school and involving the students in the community, aside from just bringing the community in, is also of vital importance, I think. Do you have any other ideas on?
no, you covered it.
Okay. The next one would be sponsorship. And that would be, well, think about it. If you're going to have, let's say, a sports team or something, and you talk about the boosters at a regular high school, the boosters come along, and Boosters Club, different businesses run the boosters, and so they donate money to help fund part of the activities and everything like that. If you can get maybe some sponsors who might be willing to uh, help you with some money in order to do specific projects that you're doing with your students. So if you already have your goals, we talked about your goals, your mission statement, all of these things, you know who your population is going to be, you have your staff. Well, why can't you bring in some sponsors? Are you beholden to them? Well, that's part of what you need to negotiate with them. Let's say that I am working over in, I'm going to use North Portland. And let's say that I'm working over in North Portland. I want to start a new school and everything like that. And I'm looking over at the world headquarters for Adidas. And I can just walk over there and I can talk to them and see whether or not they're willing to help sponsor something that we have going for the kids. And how would that benefit them? Well, that's something we can brainstorm. How is that something that's going to benefit us and what they're getting? Well, they get a lot of PR for it. And it helps us because we're not necessarily going to be running with a lot of money. Because if you listen to the episode on funding equity, alternative, and if you listen to Between Two States, you know that alternative programs require more money to run and are usually less likely to have enough money to run for the services that their student and for everything else that their students need. So, bringing in corporations, but making sure that you have the right corporation that fits with you and you're doing it for the right reasons and they're doing it for the right reasons might be something that you really want to look at. And maybe they're willing to give you something. I know that we had some sponsorships from a major uh, producer of projectors who would give us televisions and they would give us whiteboards and they would give us all kinds of things. Of course, they were just slightly outdated. They were last year's model. But you know what? Last year's model still works. So we took those things.
Yeah, really.
And, you just don't look a gift horse in the mouth. So getting something like a sponsorship might be might be a way for you to actually get the community involved, and maybe they have some really good ideas. Think of it as kind of an informational interview when you go in there too. The same thing with getting internships. If you're going to look at internships or involve the businesses in there. So, and then the next thing that we're going to look at is going to be mentorships. How could you use a mentor, or how could you bring in mentors into your program to help the students? I'm like, for example, would you have mentors who came in and started talking to your kids? Let's say that people who have time to come out of their job to speak to the students and just explain to them. Let's say, let's talk about the trades. Let's say that it has something to do with HVAC and installing furnaces, air conditioning, all that. Well, they could come in and they could tell them, hey, look, this is what we're doing. They're almost doing a sales job because they pretty much are desperate for workers right now too. And so, just so that you know, there was a deal that we were trying to get going before I left, and there was a network of heating and cooling companies, and they were going to work with students and put them on an internship. And if they worked with them, the kids would going to be able to get their certification without having to go to community
You
college.
mean left for pandemic, right? You were,
Before I retired. Well,
oh,
yeah.
before you were, oh, yeah.
And then before I left. Yeah, pandemic and then there.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
I believe you told me this story and you said you
right.
had this kind of set up and the pandemic just shut it down quick.
Well, it did. Right.
Yeah.
And so they would still love to do something
I
like that.
hate you. I remember it distinctly because I had this big wince of inside, like
Yeah.
no,
Oh, yeah.
no. It's a
Yeah.
sweet deal because if you have an internship that pays that well out of high school, you set yourself up nicely to then go a few years into your 20s and go, maybe I don't want to do this my whole life, but I can still, I still have time and I can kind of figure it out for a few and then do something else. It's a nice way to
Right.
start.
Right.
You talk
And then
about
you
being
might also
poor.
bring in, I know that where I used to work, right down the street, there was a steel company, a foundry. And
Yeah, yeah.
just trying to get people to come in and just talk to the kids about working, doing steel working, doing different kinds of welding. Some of the kids were interested in it, not all of them were. But when you bring in a mentor, not all the kids are going to want to be with that one mentor. So you're going to have to figure out who would be appropriate and then look around your community to
Yeah.
figure out what would be the best
One of the points to
suitable fit.
remember, you're kind of competing with the military too. The military has a publicity department. That ad, be one of the few, the proud. That's
Right,
an advertising department that goes on the TV and says, "Hey, young man, young lady, we have a thing for you. It's called the Marines," and they don't know anything about the foundry or HVAC or any
right,
being an electrician, but they do know about the military. So it's kind of up to us to bring that in and say, "Hey, there's
well,
other things too."
right,
And
right. And so, but the thing is that the military is actually down. They're desperate
yeah,
for recruits right now, and they're
yeah,
they're
I knew that too.
they're
Even with
way
the
down on their
advertisement.
numbers.
So
So
what I'm saying is they're kind of the only thing that advertises, to high schoolers, except for college. College will advertise and the military advertises, but there's not a big push. Oh, and then of
right.
course the sham colleges
Hmm.
that turned out to be kind of like the useless
Well, I think they're
degrees.
pretty gone.
They are
Um,
kind of pretty gone,
the
unfortunately.
one thing I didn't
Not
mention
too soon.
was the number of kids who are into auto body
Yeah,
and
that is, it's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, hey, there's a mint to be made out there, and it
It,
doesn't.
cars have
And
always been that way too, and it seemed to disappear, but it never did.
no,
It
no.
just sort of got de-emphasized.
Hmm.
It's
Now,
amazing.
now there are a lot of companies. I mean, dealerships might allow your students to shadow, but if you think about it, would you let little Johnny or little Judy play on a customer's engine and start doing things with it, and assume that liability. So probably a lot of shadowing. Maybe you're going to let them do things, but it's under major supervision.
I'm thinking it's so established. Unless you know somebody and they trust you, you can't really get into a garage. I think. I mean,
Oh,
I know that there's junior college training, and it's just not something you can do anymore off the cuff.
well, we were able to do it.
Oh, at Tigard, you had or I'm sorry, at that one school. Anyway, yeah, you had a department, didn't you? That worked it.
Well, we had an auto body department, but they
Yeah.
weren't the. But it was those weren't the kids that went out there.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm just saying back in the day it was a lot more likely, but I think now these days
Right.
it's just it's so much more complicated. But that's not the point. The point is that there's so many more people that are more highly trained. There's no more like self-trained gearheads per se.
Well, here's how bad it is right now is that we had the head of the garage come out from one dealership begging our kids to come to work for them and to start doing things because they were going to train them for their certifications.
That would be quite another opportunity again. Jeez,
But the
man.
students had to commit to it.
Yeah, well, yeah. You could just give them a certification
And
and
if there's
commit
one
to it.
thing, the interesting thing is that the kids are like, wow, except that one dirty word came up, and that was commitment because they weren't quite sure. Now, the same garage, we had tons of kids who went to work there, and they're still there, and they've done very well.
Yeah, you
So,
will do sometimes very well,
right.
starting from high school and staying in a job. I knew a person in my high school started in the warehouse of a fledgling company called Nike in Beaverton.
Hmm.
It was maybe that company's maybe 6 years old.
What year was
He
that?
78. He was working in the warehouse in 1976. And as you know, 1972 is when Nike was founded. He was like one of the like what he's a triple digit employee. Let's put it that way. And he just worked himself up the ladder. His
Just out of
family
curiosity,
China.
was he still at the warehouse in '78?
He might have been. Yeah. He
What's
was a
his
high
name?
schooler. We graduated together.
What's his name?
Barada. John
I
Barada.
I don't think I knew him.
Yeah, yeah.
I worked at Nike in the warehouse in the '70s.
Talk about lucky.
I
And
I
staying is like, oh, you win, young man. Yeah.
so
He
just kind
did
of
quite
curious.
well. Yeah. He just, yeah.
Okay, so moving into the last but biggest component, and this is what is really going to get everything going, and that's going to be, well, it's almost it. There's different components to it, but the last one are the parents. How are you going to involve the parents in there? Because we've had a lot of media lately about how bad parents are and all these terrible things that parents are doing. There's also media about all these terrible things that school boards are doing that are making parents angry, and so basically, parents are scared, and that's why they're so angry, and that's why they're reacting. They don't
Yeah.
know what's going on. So you open your doors, you let them in. You have classes for parents. Have you thought about this? Bring parents in because we do have a lot of parents who can't read or write or their skills are pretty low. So why don't we have classes for them in the evenings? Why don't we have some kind of a supplement for them? And the businesses would love that too. I mean, we want a ready workforce, right? Well, we have a workforce, but not everybody is quite ready. So let's give everybody an opportunity and better their opportunities because a happy parent is a happy child. And if you have a parent who's invested and is getting something there at the school and they're learning something, maybe all they want to do is take a computer class and they learn about computers and you can teach them all about how to get online so that they can see just how little Johnny and Judy are doing. And
I've often thought that way, but it's my way of thinking about it extended about 10 steps further. Just, but I think you're right. An evening sort of venue where you could
right. Or
at
even
least
on a
open the doors to the public. The thing about the schools, when you were saying that, was that we operate while most of the parents are doing their thing.
Right.
So they can't take a day off work to come hang out. And
No.
honestly, while I'm doing my job, I don't want a parent in my classroom. It's just the relationship I have with my students. It doesn't, there's no room for the relationship at the parent and the students and everything. It's a dynamic that's not good. But I do
Exactly.
want the school open to the
Right.
parents themselves. So how do you do that? Well, you open up the hours.
You open up the hours for the
Yeah.
parents to be able to come in and be able to do things.
And
Now,
you give it classes and make it more of a community centered place.
right. So
And I
that
often
in
thought
the
that was a good thing to
evenings,
do with schools. Yeah.
maybe you have a night school for some of your students because some
Yeah.
of them might, let's say that Johnny or Judy, they have to work and they work until maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, remember they're not supposed to have to work past 10 o'clock. Child labor laws. Ha ha ha.
Uh,
Let's talk reality here. They might be working really late or else they're just up late. And so they sleep in and then they come into school and maybe they don't start school until maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And they're there until maybe 6 o'clock. At 6 o'clock, the parents can start coming in, and that's when you have students who might want to volunteer, students who are good at something. They might be able to provide the child care. They might be able to start tutoring some of the younger ones and get them going on reading. Maybe they can help them with some of their homework that they need to get done. So you start creating a place where parents feel taken care of, that they're learning, they're a part of it, and they have pride and they want their children to have pride in it as well. So you're getting this. Now, this is only going to happen as long as you have an administrator and a staff who are willing to back all of this up and have the whole thing taken care of. Maybe you also have Saturday school. Who's teaching these classes? Maybe you have an ELL class for the parents twice a week. And who's going to teach that? Have you thought about reaching out to the different colleges and universities that have a TOEFL program?
well,
That's
hire me.
teaching of English as a foreign language.
I say that
And
because hire me because I was actually hired for an evening school program when I first started, and I did
no,
it from 5 to. We did it for the kids that couldn't come during the day. They just made an evening school program. I did it from
if
5
you
to
would
8, I
like
believe.
Philip to come work for you, please send us an email at educationaltriage
I
at
mean,
gmail.com.
it was an evening school program. They hired a teacher to do it, and so because they needed that slot
Philip,
open, so it's
Philip,
cool.
stop. They got the gist. And tell us that you want Philip to submit an application with a resume and give us the deets, and Philip will be more than happy to shoot that to you. He's a free man now.
Oh,
Um,
it was a great program.
um, but no, so you
You're
have
right. Schools should be centered. There should be community open. After the kids leave, it should be open to the public and
right.
flexible as all get out. Maybe you don't have a need for
Maybe,
ELL. Maybe you have a need for something else. Well, you just shift it over. Yeah,
why don't you have well, if you have these people who are doing internships from the university or colleges
yeah,
and they're getting hours for it, so it's you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. You
that's
don't
a good idea.
necessarily need to pay them for it, but they're getting some kind of a supervised credit for it. And then you
That should
also
be
might, and the parents can be learning about contracts, they can be learning all kinds of stuff in those classes. So it's not only relevant, so they're not learning, hi, how are you, blah, blah, blah. Most of them already know that.
yeah.
They need stuff that's really going to take them
Real
down the right.
school stuff. I mean, yeah, school should be school stuff. It's not
Right.
just little fun classes. It's school. It's class. Yeah,
Right.
school,
And
school.
so is staff expected to teach these? No, because you'll get other
No,
people from the community.
yeah,
What about the
I'll
computer?
hire them.
You might actually have kids who are well versed in the computer, and this gives them really good skills. And this is awesome for the resume where they can be teaching it. Now,
Community service.
exactly.
There
So
you
here's another thing that goes with that. And this has been proven. And this has been proven in closing the achievement gap. You do something like this, and you have the parents there, and you have the parents involved. And of course, you might have these. If you have people who demand that th're going to volunteer for this, that's I'm going to let you choose your own path on that. I have my own views on that because I have a system where I want to know who's going to do it. And usually the people who really want to volunteer turn out to be the biggest disaster. And I may be wrong, but they have been proven to be the biggest disaster. And the people who have the biggest and most destructive attitudes about everything that's happening, and they are the hardest ones to rein in when they go off the rails. So you need to have everything that's going, and you want to make sure that you know how things are clogging along, right? So then you also want to make sure that if you can get medical and mental services in there as well, because if you can take care of, if the parents can come in the evenings and they can take care of those things at that time, and maybe on Saturday, maybe that's when the dental van, because I know that there's a lot of people there's some dental services that come around in a van. Maybe they can come around like once or twice a month, and they can do that, and so you can take care of those things at the same time. Make the school a place where learning happens, and that the whole child, the whole person, the whole family is taken care of. And that's building a community. And that's
Yeah,
building
yeah,
a place where everybody is getting something and you are working together. And you will find that you have more goodwill happening from that. It takes a lot of footwork to get it going. But once you have people who buy into it and you have the right committed players to it, you can get the sponsorships from the different businesses. You can get more businesses involved. You can get more monies this way. There are grants that are out there. You can do really, really well. So you want the parents involved. I don't care if they're white, black, brown, yellow, red, whatever.
step,
You want them all.
half, grand. We don't care. That's you took it to 10 steps further. I wasn't going to get it that deep, but I've always thought about it. I wish schools were community centers. I wish they were after the kids left. They'd be well, the kid, like the parents could come in and then they'd value the school because their kids go there and they go there. But
Mm-hmm.
then it was open later, and it was sort of an open door policy, and it
Mm-hmm.
was more than just oh, you go to the school and I go to work and I don't know what the heck you do. What is it you
Right.
do during the day? I used to drop my kids off at school and I'd say go learn something. Just kind of sarcastically, like, I'll see you later. Because once
Well,
you go in there, you're just doing it. Yeah.
it takes away the mask of being a daycare center.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true.
It actually becomes something that's vibrant, something that's living,
Hmm.
and it makes it its own ecosystem that the parents are also involved in. And there may be parents
Hmm.
who just don't have the energy or the wherewithal to be able to get in there, but those are the ones who you can talk to. You could
Yeah.
also open up on the weekends for that, and you could have um, parents who teach workshops, because there are parents out there who want to teach how to do certain kinds of cooking. They want to do different kinds of arts and crafts. You could have all these things going. And maybe it's not necessarily with one specific migrant or one specific minority or majority group. You could
That's
have
just what
all
your
kinds of
parents are.
things that
Yeah.
go on. So the parents, believe it or not, but the parents are desperate for this kind of involvement. Especially even at the high school where I used to work, the parents really wanted to do this, and the administrators stomped on it
Yeah.
because they didn't that because they wanted to be in control.
Yeah. Well, to really lead well, you have to know when to let go of control and know that you still have control. you know, you have to know where your limits are and your expertise, and to allow people to express theirs and make things better for all.
Oh yes. Well, let me read you this. This is the paradox of letting go. This is from the Tao of Leadership. When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. When I let go of what I have, I receive what I need. These are feminine or yin paradoxes. By yielding, I endure. The empty space is filled. When I give of myself, I become more. When I feel most destroyed, I am about to grow. When I desire nothing, a great deal comes to me. This is all from the Tao of Leadership, and that's only part of that. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's
Oh,
by John Hyder. It's a wonderful book. I've had several people give it to me, and I keep it close to me, and I've given it away as gifts to a lot of people. But um, I think I believe that once we take ego out of what we're doing and if we look at what's going to benefit the whole rather than what benefits us, we ourselves are taken care of.
I agree totally. Sometimes hard to see,
It
but
is.
always the truth.
It is. But one of the most uh, one of the most wonderful things or outcomes from doing a program like this where the community is so involved is that they found that the achievement gap began to narrow, and it narrowed and it narrowed and it finally came down. And this happened by 2009, 2010. I maybe it was even earlier than that. They were finding that they had closed the achievement gap with, I remember, one or two schools down in San Diego, and there were a few other schools throughout the country who were able to accomplish this. Where they are right now, it's hard to say because new people come in with new ideas, and they kind of muddy up the waters. But I haven't seen anything from those schools since. And I was trying to find the documents that I have because I unearthed them the other day and I cannot find them now. Um, while I'm doing my death cleaning, um, it's absolutely amazing because one of the things that we really want for all of our students in alternative ed and in mainstream is that they are able to be successful and achieve, and that we close that achievement gap so that everybody has a strong foothold once they walk out that door with that cap and gown. Am I not correct?
We got to give them the best chance to be the best them.
Exactly. And they're not
Yeah.
all going to be the same. And so
No.
this whole idea of conformity is a pile of rot. So if everybody's going to conform, then there's not going to be anything new. There's not going to be anything great. And yeah, so we need to do that. We need to encourage our students to be, we need them to be the little rugrats that they are sometimes because that's their spirit. We want that
Yeah.
spirit to continue.
We have to remember that we were once those little rugrats too.
Indeed. Indeed. And I think that's what frightens some people is they see themselves in those kids. And so sometimes I just have to laugh. Other times I brace myself.
Yeah, I never say it to the kids. Yeah, I was worse than you. I never say it, but I do say I was worse than you. Sorry, mom and dad. I kind of silently apologize to my parents quite a bit. So.
I look at parents today and I look at my parents and I think, wow, my parents were so incredibly tolerant compared to parents from today. But then there were
Uh,
other, but their expectations were very different than a lot of parents today. So and I'm not going to get into that because I don't want people giving me the stink eye, but we were not allowed to watch TV. On school nights, we got, if we had to prove that our homework was done, we had to do some reading, and then we got a half hour of TV before we went to bed. And that was after we browbeat them.
yeah, I'll browbeat them.
And we got 1 hour on Sundays, and Saturday and Friday and Saturday nights, my parents were usually going out, so we controlled the television.
Yeah, I don't try to compare the way I grew up to the way it is now because it's totally different.
Oh, it's so different. We
It's
didn't
just
have the computers,
oh yeah, we had
and the
three channels, man.
yeah.
Four
Oh yeah.
actually.
I mean, if kids tried to do the things that we did, I mean, we would grab our money and we would run through down the dark streets
Yeah,
and then run through the woods and then we'd pop out on the highway
right.
and then we would run as fast as we could across the highway to
They
the
they didn't
store.
even make bicycle helmets. You couldn't buy one. No one made one. They
Oh, we
weren't
didn't
made.
we were see we were just running in our little Teds.
Right? And then like seatbelts in cars. We went
Yeah, we didn't
over
have
the
those.
back seat into the back of
Right.
the station wagon back again. And the parents said, quit doing that. We go, no, it's fun. And we go moving back in the cab. You'd stand surf in vans
Right.
in the big smokestack vans.
And the station wagons where we would
Yeah,
sit there in the back, and when it
that's it.
stopped, everything kind of careened forward.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, it
yeah.
was like how we lived. I
Or the
do
rumble
not.
seat. Do you remember the rumble seat in the
Yeah, some of
station
them had
wagon?
the Vista Cruisers. The Buick
Yeah.
Vista Cruiser had the rumble seat, and I was really jealous because our neighbors had one. We just had the back Chevy Bel Air with the back that was flat, so it
Yeah.
wasn't very fun to go back over the back seat and into. But theirs was a lot of fun. Yeah, that was rumble seat.
I think the last time I rode in one of those was around 1973, maybe
Sounds about
74.
right. Yeah,
I think
73.
I think we drove down to
Yeah.
some tiny little town way over in eastern Oregon, near the border. And my parents' friends, they were sheep ranchers,
Oh, well, there you go.
and so we sat back there just with all the dirt coming up, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Good times.
Seriously,
Good times.
but we had our
traffic fatalities.
exactly.
Oh,
Okay.
here we lived.
Okay, so I think we've pretty much covered this for this week. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you then. Goodbye, Philip.
Happy fall. Aloha.
And for all of you, remember to subscribe and leave us a review. That helps the algorithm to help other people find us. And we are growing, which is really kind of nice. So thank you all for doing that. And please do reach out to us. And we are out.